Hi, this is Isabelle
And Gabrielle.
and today we want to share some tips with you on how to get your seedlings that were inside outside. We'll see how it goes.
Hi, what we want to talk about is when you can plant your brand new seedlings outside. So what you need to do first is you need to look up what your zone is. And how you do that is you would get onto a local University Extension Office website. You can get on the Farmer's Almanac website, any kind of botanical university website, and put in your zip code and your zone is, and then what your frost date is. You would probably have to do a specific search for that. You never want the temperatures at night when you're sleeping to get below 32 degrees, because that would damage your seedlings and it would damage any brand new plants you planted outside, like tomatoes or peppers or anything that's very tender. So you want to make sure that you always plant for your zone and then pay attention to that frost date.
So how you harden off your seedlings is you take your plants outside during the day in dappled shade for about 1 to 2 weeks before your average last frost date. This gets them ready to be outside permanently in the wind and the temperature fluctuations, and then before nightfall, you bring them back inside to be safe inside. So you'll do that every single day for 1 to 2 weeks before that frost date.
Next, we're going to talk about how to prepare your soil in your garden, or if you're planting in a planter, what you need to do in that planter. If you already have a prepared area or a garden area that already has soil in it, you want to make sure that you want to check your soil. So my soil happens to be very sandy and it has a bit of clay mixed into that sand. So this is my native soil right here, and it does crumble pretty easily, but I can see in it that it has very large chunks of sand. So what that means is that it drains very quickly. And what I want to start bringing into my garden area is something that has organic matter. This not only has nutrients, but it brings in a different texture to this soil that is very, once it dries, it's very hard to work with. And it's also hard for plants like beets and potatoes and carrots to grow into it very easily. So what we did is we put down a pretty long row of this, this is called soil conditioner. And you can buy this at nurseries or home improvement centers. And it's pretty much mostly like forest products and maybe a little bit of peat and maybe some compost or manure. But it's mostly forest materials. So what I did is I put it down on the surface, and I'm going to use a small pitchfork or some kind of a garden spade or Horry knife. And I'm going to fork it in and bring up some of that native soil and turn the soil conditioner into that. And then I'll come down and I'll crumble up that native soil and really give it a good mix. Then when we add something like this to something like this, and we have a healthy amount of clay, which retains water. We have sand, which helps water drain away, but we also have organic material, which gives it a nice texture. So because this is the first year that we're doing this, we're going to turn this bark material into the native soil. Now, if you're practicing a method called no-till, you would only do this 1 year. And then from here on out, we will just apply compost or manure or something like that directly in the top, anywhere from 2 to 6 inches, depending on what your space needs. You can always get a soil test at an extension office, and they have kits and instructions of how to do that. But we're going to turn this in, and we're going to get that bark material, that soil aid, down into it, and then I'm going to kind of crush these chunks and mix that in really nicely, so that then what we get is what we have over here, which is it's already been done. And so this has a really nice loose texture. Things like beets and radishes, which I have planted in here, will have a very easy time growing into this soil because it can grow through it easily without having to try to fight against the sand and the clay mixture. So if you have any questions about making your soil better, even if you're doing it in a pot, if you're going to do it in a pot, then you just want to go get brand new potting mix or raised bed mix, fill up your pot, and plant your plants in that. But nurseries will always help you.
So now we're going to talk about planting and what to do for the various fruits and vegetables and flowers, on how to plant them. So Tomatoes are pretty specific when you're planting them. You want to have the soil prepared like we previously talked about, and you also want to do a few key things for the most successful planting and then fruiting later. We're going to now trim the tomato. Basically what this does is it helps the tomato get really strong roots so that it can be water efficient, and it will also take up nutrients to be able to grow that fruit and set that fruit. So I'm going to look at the overall height of this tomato and cut off about a third of the lower stems. So I'll just kind of estimate and eyeball that these are all these water shoots and all these suckers and all these leaves up to about there, and roots will grow out from anywhere that we bury this down in the soil. You plant them on their stem, whereas other plants you want to only plant them at the soil level where their crown is. So that's what we'll do with any other plant besides tomatoes. Even peppers, you just plant them right at their crown height. Another thing you want to do with pretty much any plant is you want to tickle its roots and kind of loosen up the root ball a little bit. This will help it break out of the pot shape and spread its roots deep and wide. If you don't do this, you'll find that your plant may not take up water or nutrients as well as it could. This is a container. You can plant tomatoes about 15 inches apart or so, depending on your style of planting and then also your type of tomatoes. Other plants, the spacing will vary. So this is nice and loose and not compacted. That's what we want. I'm just going to move it with my hand and create a hole that's about as big as wide as this, a little bit wider, and pretty deep, because again, I want to plant this up to about here. So we'll check that. And looking at the soil level, looks like I have a little bit more to go. Yeah, that should be about right. So I'm going to set this to the side for one moment, and I'm going to use an organic fertilizer like this Gardener in Bloom. This one specifically says tomato vegetable herb, so you want to look for something like that that's specific to your plant, and then follow the application rates. This kind of fertilizer I can use when planting. Other fertilizers there might be different, but I've read the application rate and I'm gonna put that right in the hole. Tomatoes are heavy feeders, meaning that they appreciate a lot of organic food throughout the season to be able to develop fruit. And I'm just gonna backfill it with that soil that we moved around and compress it down just pretty firmly. And then I will keep my label so that I know what kind of tomato this is. I remember throughout the season. Stick that down in the dirt. And then one more thing that we're gonna do to pretty much all plants that we transplant is pinch them off. So for this one specifically, we're gonna leave the little sucker that has begun at the very top, but we're going to remove any blooms that are beginning, because again, we want really strong roots before we want fruit. So, and these grow fast, and we've got a good season to get fruit. So pinch that off, compost it or whatever, and then we want to look around and see what suckers are here still. So this is a sucker in between the leafing branches. And we're just going to remove that and remove one over here, and then I'm going to water it in and let it kind of cool up a little bit around the plant. Let it soak in and do it again so that it's nice and deep. And then I will move on to all the other plants we'll be transplanting. So for flowers, those are going to be right at the crown height. And for squash, there's a general rule of thumb that you want to handle them as little as possible. Sometimes they'll come in like a cocoa coir pot or something that can decompose. Maybe you've made your own paper pots. Those kind of things, squashes and any cucurbits, you want to keep their root ball intact and just gently transplant them up at that crown height, just right at the soil level, unlike this tomato. So peppers, eggplants, celery, beans, all those things. And one last thing that we'll do to the tomato and several other plants that we would plant is get them some sort of trellis system. This one on its tag says that it's indeterminate, meaning that it will vine and vine and vine for as long as it lives until the frost kills it. So We definitely want to get some kind of trellis or something to keep it going up, and we'll also prune it throughout the season to keep it fruiting. This is just your basic tomato cage, and as it grows, we will move the leaves in between, maybe use some ties to secure it.
Watering and fertilizing is really key to healthy, strong plants for the whole entire season. Watering is probably even more important if you had to pick one or the other that you really want to focus on. And you want to make sure and water every single day for at least a month after your seedlings have been planted. If you've planted seeds like I have over here, I have to come out and water these every single day. And if it's really warm, I need to water them twice a day because the top couple of inches dries out. And so I give them a good soak, and I'm waiting for those hardy seeds to come through. They happen to be beets and radishes, and I just do that and I let it soak in. So watering with an automatic system, that makes things a little bit easier because you can set your timer and then you can water things according to that timer. So once your plants are established or your seedlings are very strong and have grown a couple of inches tall, you don't need to water them every day anymore unless it's really warm outside. You can cut back to 4 or 5 times a week. And with vegetables and fruiting plants, they just need more water than things like some perennials and trees that are more established in your yard. So just make sure and pay attention, check your soil moisture. You can also tell because your plants may wilt, which is called transpiration. And then you know, oh, I need to water those plants. But you really don't want to stress them out with any kind of lack of watering. You want to make sure and stay consistent, put it on a calendar, put it on a phone alarm, and keep your things nicely watered. If you do have like heavy clay soil, you'll need to pay a little bit closer attention because plants don't do as well in clay because it binds nutrients, it holds moisture really tight. It is harder for root systems to grow through them if you haven't worked in a lot of mulch or compost into it. And so just pay attention if you have or you had no choice and you had to plant in a certain clay area, just make sure and check it often, and you probably need to water a little less often. And then another really important thing is fertilizing. So you can use a commercial fertilizer that then you would just make sure and read the instructions on the package and follow them very closely because they're important. Or you can buy something called compost tea and amend the soil with that. You can do spikes like slow release spikes. There's all sorts of different ways to feed your plants. And you just need to figure out what works best for you, do a little bit of research, and make sure that your plants get the best shot that they have for the year.
Some common problems that might happen as the season goes on and that you want to look for are nutrient deficiencies. Usually it's yellowing leaves. Sometimes you might see that your blooms aren't coming. Maybe you aren't getting a lot of fruit setting. So what you want to make sure and do is stay consistent with fertilizing them, whether that's organic fertilizers or compost. You want to make sure that you keep everyone well fed. Another common issue might be pests. That can be aphids or munching insects, and there's different applications or different control methods to protect your little seedlings. One of the best things to do is actually to identify what's happening from a pest or what the pest is first before you do anything. So do some searching or ask your friends, is this an aphid or maybe a snail or a slug? You want to make sure you know what you're dealing with before you treat it in any way. The other thing that might happen is water stress. You have to be super consistent so that your plants can grow deep, strong root systems. If your soil isn't amended, your plants can really struggle and just be stunted. If you plant in too shady of a place, you may not get very many blooms. There's also disease issues. So you want to look for powdery mildew. You want to look for any kind of funguses growing. That might happen due to overhead watering, and then in a shady or packed area, it doesn't have enough air circulation to move around each little plant to dry them out and keep them aerated and free of those kind of pathogens.
Have fun this summer.